And it's on.
So good evening. We're here with KATERYNA FILYUK, which is chief curator of the foundation Isolatia, which was founded in 2010. And we will talk with her again on the theme of independence, but related to the context of the former Soviet Union, because KATERYNA was born in Ukraine and she's partially based there, so she knows very well this context. And we will maybe analyze with you the historical development of this theme, starting from the shift between after the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. So how can you trace this development before and after this date?
Good evening, first of all, and thank you for having me here. So I would probably start with setting the scene with talking about the movement called non-conformism that was very present in all post-Soviet Union countries, or Soviet Union republics, I would say, in the 60s and the 80s. And basically, it was a group of artists, or in some cities there were just individuals, they have no one to team up with, who were against socialist realism canon. And because of that, they were not part of the official circles. They were not the members of the artistic council, and as a result, they couldn't have official commissions from the state, and they were sort of like unemployed unless they had some other jobs. Which was a very dangerous position in the Soviet Union, because everyone was supposed to work and have a proper work. To that point, even that it was difficult for them to get canvases and oil paint, because these materials were only available for the members of the artistic council. However, they were pretty active, and they organized so-called apartment exhibitions or flat exhibitions, and in this way created sort of this informal underground circles where they, in Moscow, for instance, they were much more politicized, and they were kind of criticizing the Soviet power. In Odessa, where I come from, they were much more focused on keeping the modernist tradition alive, because this was completely vanished by the Soviets, and it was only about socialist realism. So yeah, there were differences between them, but I would say that they were independent to that point that some of them were working like guards in in a hospital, or cleaning the streets, or so wiping the streets or something like this.
All kinds of jobs.
Yeah, just in order to be able to express themselves in the artistic field without these limitations that the official canon was kind of building.
And then, of course, everything changed after 1989 and the fall of the communism. And in which direction this theme of independence developed?
Yeah, of course, everything changed dramatically after the. It's interesting that for Westerners, it's the Berlin Wall that kind of marks the end of the Cold War, while for us it was the collapse of the Soviet Union that happened in 1991. So we had like another 2 years, let's say, after the Berlin Wall. Yes, the new art scene, and I can speak about Ukraine, was kind of drunk with this freedom and with this realization that they can do whatever they want, so they experimented a lot. It was a time of squats. It was a time of experimentation with different mediums, and I think it was a direct reaction to these limitations and censorship that was predominating art scene for 70 years.
And maybe there was also a connection with the idea of the national independence, because Ukraine became independent in this period, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was actually pretty important for Ukrainian artists to set this boundary between Russian and Ukrainian artists because many people from Ukraine would go to Moscow as it was a capital, obviously with much more opportunities that any other city can offer. And what is interesting that these artists from Ukraine, they were called the Southern Wave. So it was like, they were like thousand Russians, you know, not considered to be Ukrainian. So of course it was also very important to kind of declare their independence from this point of view.
And what is the situation now, according to you, and also in the light of your experience as the curator of this Izolatia Foundation, which was affected by all the political turmoil of Ukraine?
Well, I would say that now, or at least for a couple years ago, still that was the situation. Another kind of dependency was created, and it was a dependency from private money, from private funding, because government and the state was kind of avoiding contemporary art in any possible way. So there was no governmental funding until 2 years ago. And of course, if you work with a private foundation, there are certain rules that you cannot avoid. So many left-oriented artists were refusing to collaborate with private foundations, and especially because the fact is that most of them were run by oligarchs. So the idea is that, you know, it's a person who kind of privatized half of the country, made a fortune on that, and then invested very little money in art, in a way kind of trying to make up for this robbery of the property. If we talk about Izolatia, it's a very particular case, and I think it has to do with being independent as well, because it's a foundation that, as you say, it was established in 2010 in Donetsk, which is eastern Ukraine. And as we know, in 2014, the war has started. And the story goes that a person who sympathized somehow to Izolatia called one of the employees and said, "You have 24 hours to leave, because tomorrow militia is coming, they're gonna occupy and seize the premises of your institution, and you won't be able to take anything with you, so take whatever you can and leave." So the team left, and as a result, their institution relocated to Kiev, where we still operate. And the premises of Izolatia in Donetsk were converted into a training camp and a prison, which is hard to believe in 21st century, I think, because it's more like the prisons are being converted into art centers, while in our case, it was the other way around. And also, these people, they destroyed immediately most of the artworks, site-specific artworks that they found, out of revenge, I would say, because in their opinion, contemporary art is dangerous, is something that appeals to Western values, instead of being very traditional, very, grounded in this, in a way, also nationalistic idea. Yeah, it was a very difficult experience for us, but what we learned, or I think what we gained, is this fearless, eagerness to talk about whatever issues are important, the topics that are marginalized, the topics that are usually not so present in public discourse, and we are always kind of assuming this position also of activists, not only an art institution that deals with art per se. For instance, we had a project about the rise of right wing, we had a project about the LGBT community, which is still a very problematic issue in Ukraine. We talk about internally displaced people, which is a big topic again in Ukraine. So, you know.
Okay, good luck and thank you very much to KATERYNA, FILYUK.
Thank you.